Hey family, I wanted to take some time to shout out our proud partners in Georgia. That's Beaver Toyota of Cumming. Listen, from our home team to yours, we wanted to say thank you for being such an integral part of the first of many seasons of God Loves Sports.
I've always wanted to be in the Hall of Fame.
Welcome to the show, guys. God Loves Sports. We have Dr. Galen Cole, Champ Bailey, and myself, Trey Battle, as your hosts. And this is a very special guest we have, because a lot of what we do as athletes is, well, after athletics, right? When we retire. When what a lot of people don't realize is when you have been at the pinnacle of a profession for so long, and when you are no longer doing that, there are things that you have to work through mentally to go from the mountaintop back to where you're going to settle for the rest of your life. And not saying that that's not anything that's great, but mental health is so important for not just athletes, but for people all around us. Yeah. I think the CDC says that it's the number one disease right now, or health problem in the world. Not just America, not just in the state, not just in this hemisphere, like the world. Right. So we have the renowned Dr. Galen Cole with us today. So a question that we want to start off with is, in order to do the level of work that you've done over your career, to the degree that you've done it, there has to be a level of passion. There has to be this passion that's there. So I'm curious, how did that passion spark in you?
Wow, it came after I started practicing. So it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I want to be a psychotherapist. My first job out of college, I was a head wrestling coach out of college. And they had to find something for me to teach, so I taught psychology because I'd wrestled from 5th grade all the way through college. They thought I would be a good coach. I was very successful, but I was a terrible coach. And my family was like, oh my gosh, he's 23, he's a head coach at a college. There was pictures in the newspaper, and then I couldn't make my athletes suffer like I'd suffered. I had way too much empathy because I'd cut weight for years and worked out a tremendous amount, unbelievable amount of suffering. So I was very gentle with my athletes, and we did terrible. So just like there was this big news article about me coming into the community, there was a big news article about me leaving. Coach fails on every level. But I'd been teaching psychology, and I was in a difficult place. So I thought, you know what? I could see myself doing that. So I went back to school and got the training, and then I got a job at CDC in Atlanta. So I've been in Atlanta for almost 30 years. I was at CDC for 23 years. After work, I would go to my clinic and see clients. So I was working to help the masses through public health at CDC, and then helping one person at a time after work. So the passion, I guess, goes back to wanting to help people, having a lot of empathy. And one thing that sports taught me was that if you work hard, good things happen. My family had no money, so my shot out of my community was a full ride to a university in wrestling and sports. So I'm not sure where the passion came from, but it's still there. Maybe it's partly because this is God Loves Sports. Anybody who's been serious about athletics has a conversation with God and maybe that's where the enthusiasm came from.
I love it. Now, you mentioned that empathy piece, and that empathy was a result of life experience. So in your studies, in your career, how often do people truly lean into their life experiences and use that as a leap board, or like a, just a jolt, or just to galvanize positive change in their lives? And how frequently do they not? And if they don't, what are the hurdles that keep them from actually cultivating that change?
So leaning into my life experiences kind of leaned into me. When you suffer, it gets your attention. When you lose, I'm so grateful I turned out to be a terrible coach. Because it set me on a path that has led to a lot of success. I love what I do, and I'm ironically around athletes a lot because I have a contract with the NFL. So I see kind of where I left off as an athlete. I've landed back into that community, and I'm anxious to. You used the words leaning in. Yeah, I'm waking up every day, and I'm putting one foot in front of the other.
That's good.
And I think the reason I'm here is because of my mistakes and learning from sports, from life, that when you fall down, if you can bounce back, you probably learn something, and you're probably better off because of it.
Yeah, that speaks to the perseverance, right? Because
yes,
adversity as an athlete, it's coming, and it comes in bunches. It comes sparingly. But it's gonna happen. You're gonna lose on a play. You're gonna lose a game. You might lose your job. I mean, you might suck at coaching, right? So I think how you react in those moments really tells about that person's character as well. So if you're talking to a lot of athletes and you know that they've experienced these roller coaster rides in sports, that transition out of the game, because I think for both of us, our careers ended differently, but it ended.
Right.
And when you played for so long, you're accustomed to having somebody tell you what to do all the time, and then you get out of it. Like, what are some of the biggest challenges you see with guys transitioning from the game?
So many things. Just being kind of noticed by everybody, going from that place, and the day after, people start looking at you differently. And that thing you prepared for your entire life, in my case it was college wrestling. There aren't any jobs for college wrestlers after college except for coaching. But in terms of professional athletes, it's if you've had good agents and they've helped you think about more than just being successful on the field, if they've helped you think about finances, if they've helped you think about relationships, if they've helped you think about mental fitness. And I mention agents because that's typically who I'm working with. They have a lot invested. It's like anything else. If you plan for your career, you're going to do better. If you plan for retirement, you're going to do better. But that's not how all of this works. People aren't going into the draft planning for retirement. They're planning to be successful in their sport. And so, not sure if I answered the question, but there's a lot of bumps along the way if you haven't prepared.
Yeah,
if you prepared,
preparation,
yeah.
Hey guys, it's that part of the show where we take a Toyota timeout, sponsored by our friends at Beaver Toyota of Cumming. I've never thought of my agent from that regard. I don't think I've ever, outside of contract negotiations, I don't think I've ever had another type of conversation.
See, but that's different from my experience, right?
Really?
We were sort of close. Like, I was with him for 15 years.
Wow.
Like, I mean, that's just football stuff. But in between that, there was a lot of, you know, making sure you did this, introducing me to the right people to manage the money, and, you know, just every little thing about life. He was there and fielding calls about everything, you know, because when people want to reach me, they go to my agent. So that exposes him to so many things outside of contract negotiations and things like that. So yeah, that's a good example of the relationship a player deeply can have with his agent. And that's that. I mean, my agent introduced me at the Hall. Like, so
wow.
yeah, he did my introduction. So that tells you how close we were,
That's
right? So, and I always knew I was his biggest client. He didn't have a lot of big clients. My brother was his client, you know. So I understand, like, yeah, those are usually the gatekeepers for most athletes. But yeah, for a guy that had a shorter career, who probably didn't have a lot of endorsements and things coming at him, there was not that opportunity to build that relationship. Absolutely. But I'm sure you had somebody that was still, you called, like, whether it was an old coach or somebody in the community you grew up with, there's always somebody that kind of works with you that kind of becomes that gatekeeper, or somebody that mentors you in some fashion. So
that makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense. There's a learning curve on the front end, and there's a learning curve on the back end of the career.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
As we're talking about learning, I was looking up some of your published work. I think you have what 10 to 15 published articles and 4-5 books.
Yes.
Right.
And actually, I know exactly how many in both cases, because that was a thing in my career. I have 41 scientific papers.
41.
Hitting 40. You're slightly above average, and I have 7 books, and 3 are good ones. Ask me afterward.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
So one of your books, Life Scripting, right?
Yes.
That's what a lot of athletes have to do in retirement. We have to re-script our lives. So give us a little insight on how a conversation will look with a retiring or athlete that's phasing out of the NFL. How would we re-script our lives? How would you walk a client through that?
So I see a lot of actors, producers. I have connections in Hollywood and professional athletes.
Great. And I got 2 Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
There you go.
But
He's
the reason I say that is the way that book came about. I consulted on a lot of different television shows. One of them was Private Practice, and I hadn't seen Private Practice. They wanted me to come out and help make the script more believable. So I flew out to LA. On the way out there, I'm watching a couple of episodes, get a car, go to Raleigh Studios, go into the scriptwriter's room. There's 7 of them there. And they're asking me questions about this character. And as I'm answering questions, they're changing the script. And I'm like, oh, wow, I'm influencing this show. I knew that from previous shows, but it's hitting me. This is exactly what I do in my clinic. So after I got done doing my thing, the 7 writers consolidated their notes into the new version of the script, handed it off to Rachel. I saw Rachel over there practicing how she was going to play this role. Jennifer, the director, came on scene. They shot that segment of the episode. Jennifer looked at Rachel and said, "Great job, you transported me." And I thought, wow, I just wrote a book. So I went out into my rental car and put together Life Script Restructuring. So in other words, people write a new vision for how something should be. You get a good idea of what the outcome is, and you play that new part based on the script. And that's exactly, if you haven't got a vision of post professional athlete, you're going to have to create that vision. And even though psychotherapy might sound sophisticated, it's kind of always the same thing. You're helping people come up with a vision, create a process for realizing that vision, practicing the process, figuring out which parts work, which parts don't, and persisting, experiencing, and that's one of the big reasons people are struggling so much with mental health today is they've been taught that they should move away from pain. I don't know if you know about what's happening on a lot of university campuses with microaggressions and all that stuff. Like, somebody offended me, so I'm going to move away from that, when in fact the only way you grow and evolve is you move towards resistance. You overcome resistance. So again, to your point, the script needs to address your physical health, your mental health, your mental fitness, all those things that make for a good life plan.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, but it's so intuitive.
Think about
though.
it like that.
It's so intuitive because from the time we were kids, playing in backyard, barefoot, whatever, we had this vision that the finish line was the NFL.
Yeah.
Like, for you,
Literally.
Hall of Fame, right?
That,
we had
that
this
was
vision.
it. And when I got there, I probably was gonna play forever.
Exactly, right? That's the script. That's the narrative that we wrote. We have this defined finish line. But what happens when you get to that finish line? And I think so many of us finish the book there.
Yeah.
But if we talk in terms of quarters, right? By the time most guys retire, we're 30.
If you're lucky.
Yeah,
if you're lucky.
Life expectancy of humans, well, what is it, 70 something?
Yeah, man.
Right?
We're not even halfway.
You're not even at halftime yet. You're not even
halfway
eating orange slices, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do for halftime in the second half? Like, what's the vision for that? And that's when we get back to Dr. Cole's. Like, once you can define it, you can plan to get to it. You can go through OTAs. You can go through workouts. You can go through endorsements with your agent. Like, we did all those things to make it, and then we just let it drop.
Yeah.
Man, that's so good.
I think you just wrote a new book for us.
there you go.
You about to
there
take
you go.
that.
Book number 8 for you.
It's halftime.
You can elaborate on the book.
I
There we
love
go.
it. I love it.
Awesome.
Well, God loves sports. We're so thankful to have Dr. Cole join us today. Again, Champ Bailey, Trey Battle, your co-hosts. And Dr. Cole said, it was almost like an epiphany, but if you can't define where you're going, it's going to be very difficult for you to be successful to get there if you don't know where you're going. Yeah. So that's the takeaway from today. Thanks for tuning in to this episode, and we'll see you next time.